Hello, this video uses, I'm not a licensed journalist. This video uses sources of MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, and their sources, and their sources where it and how it is relevant, where and how quality of fact-checking nature is being and has been offensively maintained by a breaching method, effectively to maintain qualities plural of fact-checking nature, where people will say, do whatever to keep a quality of fact-checking nature at all locations necessary to counter a quality of fact-checking nature called criminal insidiousness, for example, and as it is being and has been generated by a hyper-archetypal breaching human fact-checking nature breaching method since semi-ancient times. Prepare our minds, vaccines. The species body longs to shed a box, some pace, some rest. I tell it best, vaccines. It is more probable and practical. See, we have the sciences having been self-valued, abridged since semi-ancient times. Prepare your minds. So you came through campuses that have the hypernative words as your own, even if you're not Native American. If you are Native American, then further they had your words further. The short words allowed at each age still. And we are supposed to learn about how each age is given the directions to use that hyper wisdom, smart. Prepare your heart. Black pupils, whites of eyes, vaccines. Alpha longs, wall. Know how M is hyper additional to that longing. Alpha is hyper additional to mother. Here, the semi-ancient ways and needs appear. Long, alphas walk. English, like the Greek, reportedly Greek letters, also spell out a word. I don't know if it is such that they also spell out a sentence, but English words do. So, this is decipher of what the ancients had already revealed. Understanding why and how we are individual grouped together. So understand that and how we're gonna have a better definition of serious, because you guys have serious definitions of serious, non-serious that are unreal. Because everything that is serious or non-serious, everything is about the simultaneous. And that is because everything is about the hyper-simultaneous. And had honesty been known before you were kids and child abuse by this breaching method that measures and maintains effectively the identities as modern countries, individual grouped together, self-value uses of that, left criminally foreign influence, tactical ulterior from how we are individual grouped together. Same people even, who are the minority of representatives here and there, where we are bound. I'll gather around. Because this is one of the things that is one of the answers / asks that are increasingly valuable, where and how abuses of kids are, abuses of elderly are, where and how they are connected, and how it stays blamed on other things, others, ourselves, and where and how that is gotten away with, blaming on other things, others, ourselves, even when there are real exceptions. If we pay attention, all the reports on the shootings and things like that, it goes back to what is actually recorded, which shows that fabricated things are being recorded. What is actually recorded shows people having still juries. There was a please tell Judge Napolitano too, because, for example, it's hyper evidential where and how his Facebook page, his social pages were used by what uses the employments as, identities of the law. It's one thing to speak about, to be an identity of the law, to speak for, or I'm the one who knows about the law. That we have to explain our whole life to explain exception nature? No. They're fabricating things into databases, and their self-value roles with that being and having been facilitated at the campuses we went to at each age of our lives, and where and how we're locked into it, this trap with others. But see, the breaching method measures and maintains distinctly from our own, as each modern country, where our names are being and have been assigned to meanings and values and value progressions that have nothing to do with their natural / hypernatural assignment / S. I tell it best by saying where and how more and more of the forever nature we are that we agree upon and already had agreed upon legally. So in other words, exceptions and exception nature. Nature uses true one way, true always. Magicians use them differently. And so this is a different kind of different kind of illusion methods where they are completely fact-checking nature oriented. Hyper predicate act delivery system method, hyper criminal insidiousness delivery system method, bound with those identities of criminal insidiousness that are invisible but still discernible. And so we have the phenomenon of how people were, the breaching method wanted and needed nature to demonstrate the breaching method, a part of logic that is honest. For example, where honesty is something that people accept as only positive, and as a contrast to lying, because honesty is in collusions with sequence shifts, where liars have been getting away with it, pretending little kids are liars, and that adds up because it's mixed with a whole bunch of natures of organized crime that are totally distinct, but the breaching method brought them simultaneously totally down distinct, didn't it? And it wrought and maintained uses of that totally distinct from that, didn't it? And so where and how the economy's values and things tied to the economy, for example. We don't have a location that can afford properly discern what our founders left us to discern about this. In other words, the breaching method too uses exceptions and uses exceptions and exception nature's tactical ulterior from how nature does. And it propagated people doing that. People roll self-valuing that as a certain type of names, Knaves, that everyone was A through Z, where how the phenomenon of people blaming other things, others, or selves for the real cause of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures is relevant. So we increasingly come to it and stay. I mean, a whole bunch of things that were distinct identities of criminal insidiousness, where we come to subjects like where and how we have black people's whites of eyes, and we have different color eyes as exceptions in exception nature, where nature itself has a system and method means to show us a better than perfect syntactical wording of things. So boxings. So at formal locations, worse than witch trials, before, during that, as we know, was partially made up. And said, in other words, and we know way more than partially, they were making up and hiding things about the significance of their roles with those crazy breaching method laws, using the course of black people's whites of eyes applied for its breaching method, where everyone was sickly, distinctly fact-cheating nature oriented, enslaved. The suburbs were designed before our founding parents were born. By that, entrenched the northern colonies and southern colonies sickly distinctly, while measuring and maintaining the causes of that, the method by it, not only blamed on other things, others ourselves, but self-valued roles and uses of that, reliant upon convictions and theories regarding history and values and significance, regarding identity. One of the things it was and is against every single colonist, and then further sickly distinctly against our colonists who had the counter extort the other founders know. They wanted us to need us to understand this, because they too simultaneously were, everyone was being measured and maintained. Quote, sense and sensibilities, unquote, use Jane Austen's phrase, or nervous system, to use medical phrase. I'm not a doctor. One of the parts of it we know is involved with this, originally still, is worse than criminal incompetence with mental health care locations, with mental evaluation locations. Now, this is also where the branch of the government share an identity. And this is also where and how it is relevant, where and how nature uses exceptions and exception nature distinctly from anything that could be invented, from programmers, for example. And this is while simultaneously uses words like time and value and nature other than they sickly distinctly from it do, while pretending other. So they are self-valuing at other locations and even over the internet, all broadcasting locations. Everyone forced to speak through others, where interbranch forging and switching names and stacking fabricated audio and video is not just in our country. It is the reason I was able to discern this is because of the timed roles and the subjects brought together by the same people with passions pretending they're not brought together. Uses of all identity ground locations. What is actually reported, more Americans want, and more people of every country want discerning. Like, for example, regarding how since before cars, before our founding parents were even born, that in slavery's fact-keeping nature, worse than witch trials, and slavery with black and white alone. And know how many different countries consider themselves, are labeled white. And, here that we have that over there. And because right through our schools have stayed as the other schools of British sciences. And see, this knew that this would not only be out to all natures of criminal insidiousness individually grouped and together. And it knew that would increasingly be self-valued as a means to blame, for where and how at all locations first, and all that corruption with the sciences and right back to all locations, uses of tactically criminally foreign influence, time treatments, people pretending passions and emotions by honesty or lying, and with names treatments. One thing this is sickly distinctly against every single person: Native American, black as labeled and white as labeled, colonists as labeled, and American citizen as labeled, and then further Native American, because in layers, this is a method that knew that how it forged pseudo unities, criminal insidious natures of unities and criminal insidious natures of independence, consciously to exploit simultaneous, consciously to keep itself as a hyper-archetypal cause to things that are assigned, but nature keeps demonstrating, but it assigned natures of logic, styles of logic, syntactically manifest, only capable of self-valuing, having been exploited, used remotely criminally foreign influence. We're self-valuing, but not for the reasons discerned. We're in other words, whether our apparent and we're apparent motivations, greed, etc., with people's narratives, theories, even when they're correct. In other words, they're leaving out the identity theft / fraud / slander method, and they're leaving out where and how their roles, preventing mandated law at locations, as the identities of the law too, delusion / S. So law, long alpha's law. Eighth, the words of English grammar are bound, individually grouped together. And this comes with the course of how the hyper-exception nature is only increasing identity of volume. Its identity of relationship to itself. And the value of that are three simultaneously increasing identities of volume, where and how we have an extent of the identity of the hyper-simultaneous that we have complete possession over. And where we have that, we have the phenomenon of its complete identity of relationship to itself, also inseparable from the smallest parts of anything, and the only increasing value of that as three only increasing identities of volume, where value is nature / nature is value, and that is consciousness. So this is where and how computers work. See, most computers, they're going to keep it top secret, because the lead up to the cattle herding approach to all identities of industries, they were assigned as a database relationship. No, since before computers, the republic for which we stand, this ancient thing, Boxing. The sciences where and how they appear to share an identity, identities individually grouped together apart. That this leaves out Earth's special difference and their own, which is hyper-additional to it, and our own, which is hyper-additional to from, as with and for itself. And see, we could be systems of it, but where and how we are value, where as nature / nature is value, where it counts most for the longest time, for example, for most critically, this is This is a science that pantheism was revealed to teach. And prayer, because this is not labeled God. God is a God variable with where and how we're going to examine the mind, how it works, how it's actually manifest. So the intelligence community has roles consciously with all kinds of foreign and domestic countries, with psychiatry, racketeering, with fact treatments at interbranch locations, where individuals are grouped in together and the exception nature tied to them. No, like prisons, where it is relevant, where that and everything was individually grouped together, was hyper-employed. All the other employments. So our founders, what they actually communicated for us to do is to communicate about the hyper-employment, not leave that out of the ratiocination / pseudo-ratiocination, contemplation, and not to leave that contemplation out, which the breaching method effectively measured and maintains, left out. And how it maintains it is one thing that affects everyone measuring and maintaining for their own other interests. And then further per identity grounds, voicings, where and how everyone's voicings of and for and as nature are effectively being and having been assigned to treatments of positive and negative, in other words, that is discernment, where and how it has increasing needs at all locations to maintain insidious applications of he said, she said at all locations, used effectively to as we're actually reported, to cover up uses of this. Everyone, since you guys were little, assigned blaming other things, others, ourselves, for the real cause of negative value nature, progressive acts of nature, and simultaneously in defense of that, incapable of being able to afford not to self-value the identity theft / fraud / slander method against every single individual, even a leader, no matter how powerful they could get. They're forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, all kinds of ways to self-value and or to counter wrong, when how they are prevented. Quality of fact, human nature, to use short words. And while they have to pretend other too. Everyone, when you entertain, practical reason, use Immanuel Kant's phrase, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase. When you entertain practical reason that can't afford, in other words, you guys can't afford the order of the finite to be used, and where it is part of how it is part of this invisible but discernible. We have individuals involved with the narratives and natures behind passions and emotions where they speak about crimes, who are individuals with more crimes and crime methods, relying upon, for example, at formal locations, everyone leaving out the changing things, putting things in increasingly valuing that haven't been done. Boxing is fun. So a whole bunch of people from Weathersfield have a whole bunch of courts and police forms. Oh, we're going to talk about the law. So law, long alpha's law. A through W are bound. Know how omega comes. O stands for omega. Omega, mother. And omega, mother's energy / energizing. God's alpha. God is an algebraic variable, being a demonstrated identity of relativity to this about the ism with pantheism, and this has ways and means, and while simultaneously being as a nature that is ways and means that reveals that no longer there's no longer a need for other ways and means applications. There is one way to reveal positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures everywhere at once, or to reveal where and how simultaneously, where and how it is not everywhere at once, is being blamed on other things, others, or self, because it's not going that way. And for example, the course of black people's white lives abridged, the significance, the relativity of it, where and how we have means. And so we're going to bring this other list into it simultaneous, because they have KKK themed, Confederate flag themed military police forms, and FBI, and various natures of federal criminals associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and Thaddeus Grabowski, on off Fox Connecticut News, with a whole bunch of names that know my name since they were kids, involved with filming little illusions, pretending to know people, and making confessions regarding each other. So this is the uses of, forgiveness is because everyone is caught guilty here. But it's also relevant to where and how they're hiding behind how they should not have been doing things they should not have been doing, but other countries doing it too. So in other words, where the kids are shared here and there, that is relevant to where and how they have each age of fact-shaping nature being and having been employed. Roles, stacking, predicate acts, self-value roles, in natures, therefore, increasingly. This is communications to people that you left out. And I know how, because the breaching method assigned everything that nature demonstrates about itself to be blamed on others, things, others, or selves effectively as a fact-human nature-oriented predicate acts method. Worse than wire crimes alone, but consciously with wire crime methods, whole predicate acts methods. So there's a Roger Suzanne, for example. I never had a conversation with him. He pretended other. And there are people that answer the phones for WFSB in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, who are also grouped where and how the interbranch individually grouped in together have predicate acts methods recorded, and actually recorded nature is relevant. See criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer. See how lawyers were in collusion with the bar originally and still. Worse than shock and awe, making and keeping others self-value, shock and awe regarding questions of law that they failed to answer correctly. And we have black pupils, whites, and lives, and nature demonstrating to us the course of. And so, wire crimes come with this. They have KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, and they have uses of pretended and needs to have credibility in the FBI. They're worse than phishing, wherein how they have a Michael J. White involved also with violence with the KKK themed, black themes, switching names, forging names, used by investigators, where they take pictures of people, make exceptions where you walk by someone, then they're going to pretend you're lying if you say you don't know them. Like in Jessica Levinsky's, people associated with that, with the Coronas, with the intelligence community, the state police, Weathersfield police, Rocky Hill police, Harvard police, and New Britain police, involved with predicate acts, with people associated with them, profess, demonstrate, confirm them involved with it, not knowing, but to an extent. Is everyone forced to speak about strangers consciously? That's one of the methods. Real sick, relative to where and how. Time can be and was and is used as a weapon for the breaching method through our own. Where and how. Names uses, timings of it, locations uses. See, this is a method that used locations since before computers. And see that this is a method that uses and has roles with database crimes that have nothing to do with computers. But see, there's still that breaching method made and keeps exceptions, the exception nature, used criminally by them. Because nature is demonstrating has nothing to do with it. And the exception nature only per how it makes more. But again, them applying this to criminally foreign influence uses of systems, of locations, of names, of A, therefore B. We are forced to sign the contracts. Oh, we agreed to this. See, they have everyone names individually grouped together at the locations when they're learning about how to tell their programs to sense and think, to sense and do things. Or judge things. See, mandated laws not followed. WFSB and NBC affiliates have roles with on-off the New Haven locations, New Haven FBI, which is right next to Yale. The reports of shootings in Chicago, no. Even if they were all made up, no. Even if witch trials are made up, because we know to an extent they were made up. We know to an extent the integrity of the FBI was made up because we have black pupils and white survivors. And we know exception nature and morality's course is one they are incapable of having, but they're needing to pretend others. Just since founding, there are collusion/S between campuses that appear to be unrelated, and vertically and horizontally, where and how that is being and having been exploited. So they have relationships with the fire departments and with the forming of juries that are relevant. They have criminally foreign influence uses of interbranch locations, all exception tied to them. As names evolved, also certain type of victim predator that makes their names used relative to where the sequence shifts are so critical. Also, where and how they speak, pretend that they're speaking to make kids feel good and feel bad. They're keeping slander and wisdom sickly distinctly, but they're like a shell game with it. Identity theft/fraud/slander method roles. They know that honest kid will know from the youngest age how to explain, has the means to explain the course of black pupils, whites, and lies, and bridge, and to be able to discern self-value uses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, where passions and emotions come with the theater only left by our founders. They stole the communications of our founders. Our founders left us to demonstrate that theater as criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, identity treatments left. Collusion/S. As roles with uses of corners of streets for this, as people uses of corners of buildings of schools. So CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News have sources of the other agencies and police forms and training of them since they were kids. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, physical delusions, I'm not a doctor. I'm going to delineate their delusions from their criminally foreign influence. Fact, human nature collusions with this, not just where known at the formal locations and subject treatments, but at other locations. This is where and how that certain type of victim slash hyper victim, victim predator slash hyper predator was originally and still is still assigned and in the way of our short words and revelations. So I have to prepare everyone to stay on the. We're going to be led by what is hard and what is not hard, delicate, finite, that can't be made up. And there's one way to do that, but we need to use God as a God variable, as is more probably and demonstrably that the ancients have did. The G, the seventh letter of the English alphabet, stands for God. God's omega diffuses. This is a definition of diffusion that is relevant to where it is three distinct identities of relationship to itself. And five distinct identities of relationship to itself. Where and how it can, five distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. Again, bound three ways too with that. The order of the finite of truth before the order of the finite now that we could build. It stays as an order, it's only increasing value. The value of its finite, grouped and together parts. Control our hearts, like so the Native Americans. They had the same education and method stolen from them that was stolen from the colonists, individually grouped and together, from a semi-ancient method of forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading, taking it, shocking on, worse, the names at all locations, areas, and states, self-valued uses of the names of any unity that could be forged as what is now known as a country. It was forged tactically ulterior from how we are revealed by the system that is inseparable from all parts of anything we can make up individually, grouped and together. Even if we could even make it up, it's inseparable. So English was revealed to teach this. So law is 3 pounds, identities of volume, long, alpha's wall. Alpha is left to right, more, where and how it is also a part of the phenomenon of hypergenesis, where and how the identity of the hypersimultaneous is per science, demonstrably, how it makes more of itself through temporary / lasting space / existence as its body, as we are to an extent in the possession of means individually grouped and together as everything, increasingly in demonstration of this. So now there are exceptions in exception nature, and definitions of reality, formal inclusion with other definitions of reality, still overt criminal enterprises and private ones, as collusion / as, forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading, quality of fact, human nature, all identity, the ground locations, and motivations, narratives, and natures, as criminal and citizens' natures, where and how it is relevant, the motivations that are being demonstrated by nature that we're supposed to, where the subject of motivations comes up for roles with those sick things. In other words, is the breaching method itself. Our founders communicated for us to not leave out the breaching methods. And why and how? They had to counter-extort. Like they had to counter-extort other founding parents. They had to counter-extort the North and the South, who stayed roles with slavery, sickly distinctly, as they had sickly distinctly before our founders were even born, been entrenched with the sick slavery. And so, in other words, people want to speak about what's hard or what's not, or what's relevant with passions and emotions as punk fakes, because that was employed as criminal insidiousness. Nature's a positive treatment. Wherever there's a positive treatment or a negative treatment, there's an identity treatment. Wherever there's a negative treatment, there's a positive negative treatment. Value treatments are hyper additional with this to discern. But see, also to discern where and how it is a value, it's life value progression. Therefore, it needs to speak, to communicate, us to communicate what it demonstrates using words like value in nature, tactical, ulterior, from how we are allowed to. Otherwise, they attach us to fake words, fake locations, fake ties to others, fake natures of ties to others, increasingly valuing this being and having been facilitated means to get away with that, relevant to what I caught them doing with the campuses of each age and nature. They have your soul. So, A through Z, distinctly from A through M, LM, and distinctly from A through L, distinctly from L through W. This has to do with yin yang and alpha and omega. For example, yin yang can never part, as the human species volume science can never part, as a part of it. That is simultaneously differentially, it's complete differentially not. And this is where Earth's a special difference. And I want a special, everything has a special difference, relevant to the identity that is making more of itself. This that the Old Testament directs us to write about. And for example, in the conversation about the law, and this too, that the Quran, at the first part of the Quran, directs us to communicate about in ways that no one will afford, while needing to pretend other with passions and emotions, relevant to where and to how the countries A through Z have stayed self-value abuses of you guys when you were kids, where and how tactically replaced with the words and the demonstrations of that of nature itself that were replaced right through your own so-called patriotism natures and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, kept hiding and eating the same sequence shifts together, same fine, active, progressive lives, with that insidiousness of people A through Z too, that one could discern by using the hyperscope. For example, where and how someone will blame why there, some people will say, oh, it's significant, but what can we do about it? To discern how people aren't honest when they, in other words, there are collusions there that have nothing to do with what they were claiming to be for, those laws. In other words, the law of nature is a name, is a system that the physical law is tactical terror from. It cannot defend its identity as trained to in us at the same time. It is taken to roles with all natures of investigators, to self-value roles with all natures of exception nature, not the interbranch, but as them, and interbranch differentially, not wanting, never, no one wanted to be a part of the system, and it measured and maintained that, and how it made exceptions an exception nature, specifically that it could exploit factory nature racketeering, database identity relationships, assignment. It assigned black slash white to mean other than it does. It assigns clear, opaque to mean other than it does. Um, and Eric Oliveri and some woman, I don't know her name, when she was a kid, they were influenced by investigators associated with the FBI on off Trinity College and with the kids' campuses to use the word opaque as simultaneously apart with identity theft, fraud, slander, fake exceptions timed at a corner of a classroom with someone not in the classroom making a statement in the form of a confession. And where people know others' names, they don't know the people involved with wire crimes, overt criminal enterprises, and private ones in the suburbs, distinctly from how in the cities. But these are names that are connected. There are individuals involved with more factual, nature-oriented predicate acts than there are streets in Hartford. As people involved with that, again, the same thing in Wethersfield. And then the time goes on. These are single individuals. They have various nature reports and police forms. There are victims, but there are victim predators with their patients, criminals, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, their neighbors, more and more. Uses of all locations, function, and where they speak in the media. They have roles with wire crime acts and methods with the broadcasted predicate acts, and predicate acts methods with the people who answer the phone, where criminally foreign influence uses of everyone forced to speak through others is also used to fabricate mixed roles, hiding what those locations use to fabricate whole conversations. And then with other people not even associated with it. So they're keeping subjects' treatments criminally foreign influence. Has something to do with their roles with the corner of Route 3 and Elm Street in Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, with the names involved, further on the campuses, with the child campuses, further involved with child abuse, as names involved with elderly homes. See, these are police forms involved with the identity grounds, things that are insidious for reasons that, were never unentrenched, and blame the other things, others, ourselves. They built a whole bunch of fake patriotism natures, that want and need people to debate things using qualities of fact, human nature that can't entertain themselves and afford the order of the finite to be used, the value of what is actually simultaneously capable of being discerned by anyone. So this employed people to use knowledge in the sciences of identity shared and the illusion of how they don't, to build that illusion rather than to reveal the special difference, relativity, hypercritically relevant here. So this is greater than and more finite than poor programming, but then why is how it works, how it senses and discerns and uses memory. And everything's conjunction to identity has an only increasing identity of volume as consciousness. Maxims. I teach us things belong, for other words are in the place. Republic's name, here once again, come on. So please share this with us. So in other words, this is the walls of our body. The breaching method measures and maintains when they bring up the physical topic of the border. of the location of the border. The breaching method measures and maintains where and how the borders, the issues in the subject's treatment are effectively tied to their collusions with their patients and criminals, and against innocents increasingly, and increasingly against those patients and criminals, keeping everyone needing to hide where and how. Total strangers increasingly including the interbranch, every member of them individually grouped together, have their uses of the identity assigned, implied integrity where they have no integrity, and that is assigned to other locations to be exploited. So they've been using parks and corners of streets and timing of people saying things, then they pretend to know them, and with complete strangers like a Joshua Julian, lying about their motivations too, because if they put that on paper, it would show where and how they set up little traps. Not even like traps. It's like they set up where people are going to go back and recollect things, and no one's going to care or lie about. There are people lying about what led up to people coming to where they saw other people. They're investing such little things. They're investing each age of correlation age to self-value roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders by men and women involves sickly, distinctly hurting each age of fact-keeping ages, weakness and strengths, specifically to keep the simultaneous from being discerned. The only increasing value of hyperconjunction has a hyperized simultaneous that is increasingly valued here, or it is forced from here, lethal hadith, not as death or life, but as the place where where more consciousness that has no criminal foreign influences, especially differentially, legalized ones or not. They never had the legal authority to collude with this breaching method. Fact-keeping nature-oriented wise. Everyone. But everyone was forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, sickly, distinctly maintained only capable of either blaming other things, others, ourselves for where and how at each age of correlation nature. Our short words are, and the significance of them are prevented. And where and how it becomes manifest, where and how all formal investigations, investigators, vetting identities, identities of perception are being and having been effectively employed, tactically delusions wrought, tactically criminally foreign influence, fact-keeping nature, quality / IES aspect in nature, and that is aspect as criminal citizens nature. So we're going to have to learn to discuss about the nature of the law with integrity and with uses of words like hard or finite that are not used to obfuscate and worse the value of what is simultaneous to and as the mind's means of perception, sense, memory, use of memory. In other words, vaccines, I teach you things belong. Vaccines don't. So 1/3/5, identity of the ground. Identities of the ground, identities of relation to themselves appear to be distinct. But upon proper observation, they are the identity, at least as the hyper-simultaneous. And that we're not supposed to agree about the name of it. There are proofs, in other words. but there are simultaneously other ways we are supposed to agree about the name of it. And there are proofs that Allah's name is used to teach this. Uh, the identity, the hyper simultaneous, as a scientific value, it is only increasing where and how certain questions are asked by the soul naturally. When I use the word soul, I mean by the nature naturally. When I use the word nature, I mean nature's nature, not the identity of nature or of reality as defined by the law. Because as defined by the law formally and informally, they have a criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and awareness of that they left out while simultaneously pretending other as employed to distinct identities of membership to it as the breaching methods, off the records, uses of everyone at each age, factory, nature, bringing other things, others themselves, the real causes of negative nature, uses of theory, self-valued, where and how the share and sciences share an identity. And where it's relevant. So in other words, switching names and forging names into branch is real. In English, know how O comes right after N and M. Mother's neutrality, omega. Know how mother is distinctly omega. Omega is distinctly, a mother is omega, but she's being omega distinctly. Both mother and omega are on the right to left side of A through W. And the value of X, Y, and Z is already value here now. Its identity of relationship to itself is. And the value of that is the hyper-perfect system, which is only increasingly perfectly. There is only increasing perfect that can be discerned. People have the debates of this are assigned at locations with people pretending passions, emotions, leaving out exceptions. And that has other functions, where and how they've been using the corners of buildings as names involved with the corners of streets criminally through time. Criminally foreign influence, where criminally foreign influence remote uses of all locations involved and still involves fact, human nature oriented predicate acts. Identity theft, fraud, / slander method. So please share this with Fox News and please share this with Judge Napolitano, because I'm sure he couldn't fathom what he then would once he realizes. And the other Fox News judge, Judge Janine, please give a response, because Fox News, they have people, a whole bunch of people associated with the FBI, state police, and natures of intelligence community and military on off Fox Connecticut News, on off the locations next to it, involved with that relevant database, names dropping and uses and identity theft, fraud, slanders instances relevant. And as people leading up to the World Trade Center attack long term in that context and since, roles with relevant predicate acts, fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack with themselves. Roger Suzanne had fake conversations with me with people associated with the FBI and the CIA and the military on off Elm Street in Rocky Hill and Weathersfield that are also involved on off the state judicial branch offices with people with the name Fianza involved with relevant body dumping spots and news reports that have roles with federal crimes with people they say are killers and people that kill. I never was a killer. No. We need to fix the fake news. And what I caught them doing with the wire crimes, even on campuses and our elderly homes. These are the policings and the courts associated with such. They were, we're going to have to make them repent. Vaccine said. to fight by the rules. So worse than election crimes were recorded. They use crime methods with phrases like conspiracy theories, preventing us from using the short words and revelations, proper communications about our founders, about John Kennedy. President Kennedy said there is President/Chief Kennedy, said there is a breaching method against this country. There's a conspiracy against this country. We have people still fabricating conversations to get over on, then people, we have experts on the mind who have been pretending people make conspiracy theories, faking conversations when they to do it, stacking on other people doing such. Until next week, we move to talk.